Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
And we're live.
Okay, I guess that's it, huh?
I went ahead and did it. I was going to give you a cold start.
Well, I appreciate that. I need something cold because, man, it's hot outside. Good Lord.
I just feel like you always hit the record button when I'm not expecting it, so I wanted to make it at an inconvenient time for you. So I feel very powerful. Well, my 4th of July weekend has been made.
There you go. Well, the joke's on you because I was not in a bad situation right there. I was ready to rock and roll.
Always.
Yeah, the on button was pushed.
Well, to be perfectly honest, this is a holiday week. We knew we wanted to record something to have out for you guys on Monday in spite of that. And so we just kind of had a last minute conversation a little while ago and, kind of went back and forth. What do you want to talk about? And what we decided was we would go back and pull your questions from a variety of sources. We have social media comments, messages, YouTube, emails, things like that, and just go through and pull some of those out that we thought would be relevant to a variety of landowners and turkey enthusiasts, and go through them. Yeah, well, just for everybody, before we clicked record, I was going through and realized that the spam folder in my Instagram had some real messages. So I have several questions that people have asked me that I have not addressed because I don't look in the spam folder very often. And for some reason, on a whim, I decided to do that. Well, there's a good reason you don't look in the spam folder very often, because it is mostly trash. Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible, but there are a few questions that I thought would be relevant here. And since I have not addressed them yet, this would be the place to do it. Perfect. Yeah. And if you have not gotten a response to me from a message, then that's probably because I'm in the same situation. As soon as Marcus, told me about that, I went back and looked at mine, and sure enough, I found a bunch of messages that were just buried, between 20 spam messages, and then you'd have to get, you'd find one legitimate one and go 25, 30 more. So that's frustrating, but we're getting there. Yeah. Well, the other thing, we've been kind of teasing, we do have quite a few people that we're trying to get lined up for episodes, and it's just difficult midsummer, especially around a holiday. Mm. So I think this is we haven't done a audience question driven episode in a while, so I think it's about time. Yeah. Yep. So what do you have? What'd you dig up? Well, one question interesting. I just so this is going to be completely out of the blue. All right, so most of that was garbled, but we did catch the part at the end about this is going to be completely out of the blue. Oh gosh. Yeah. Here, let me just pull over. That's probably good. Sorry, Charlotte. Where are you at right now? I love the idea that one of our listeners might be driving by you, seeing your truck pulled off on the side of the interstate right now and has no idea that it's you. Yeah. I am on I-10 right now. Matter of fact, I've been out in the woods collecting some good habitat data. Nice. So if you were driving I-10 near, where are you near, Marcus? I was at Tall Timbers, and now I'm on the way back to Gainesville.
Okay, so you're between Tallahassee and Gainesville on I-10, and it's 4 o'clock on the 3rd. So if any of y'all were driving that way, now you know you had a close encounter.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Well, it's difficult to keep up the pace, and I think people appreciate that. We get plenty of comments that suggest that people do, but
Mhm.
sometimes, we both have other things going on in our job and in our lives, so we have to
Sure.
make do with recording on the road occasionally.
That's right.
But I got this question out of the blue, and it really made me think, and I
Okay.
just want to see how you react to it. So, uh, we're talking about lining up guests, and we've got some that we're excited about. We're trying to get on the show.
Mhm.
But if you could just pick three people who would be what you'd consider dream guests,
Oh,
who
wow.
would those people be?
Oh, wow. Mm, that is an awesome question.
Don't you like that?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. Um, I'm sorting through options right now. I think I would need to pull people from different areas, right? Is that kinda how
Yeah.
you thought about it? So, I would
Yeah, I definitely have thought about it in that way. I've had a while to think about it.
yeah,
So,
sure. So, I think I would wanna talk to Dan Speak for his, academic perspective and his historical perspective on turkeys in Alabama.
yeah.
And, his
I
work
thought that would be one of your top.
yeah, his work on turkey research in Alabama. Um, and then I think I would really like to talk to Tom Kelly, getting his historical perspective on turkey hunting in Alabama and turkey hunting in general. But obviously, I have a lot of connections to him through being from Mobile, the Mobile area, like he was, and things like that. So
Mhm.
I think that perspective would be really, really interesting as well. And
Yeah.
then, I think maybe somebody from like a historical habitat perspective.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe like Leon Neal
Yeah. That'd
or
be a good
Stott,
one.
and he was trained by Stoddard.
Yep.
And Stoddard would be an obvious choice, but I think Leon Neal, he kind of through his career bridged that gap. He was like the generation between Stoddard and then my predecessors, the guys that you and I learned from, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
he bridged that gap. So he was a contemporary of Stoddard, and Stoddard trained under Aldo Leopold, and so he comes from that whole lineage and will have that historical perspective. But he lived up until not too long ago, so he would have that modern perspective too. I think
Yeah.
I think
That's pretty cool.
he would round that out, and he had such an extensive knowledge on um you know basically creative forestry and single tree selection and prescribed fire and all that kind of stuff in the southeast that's so
Hmm.
integral to managing turkey habitat. I love that question. A great question, whoever sent that in.
Yeah. I don't remember the name right off, but I appreciated that question as well. And it made me think, you know, about it deeply. And I kind of did the same thing originally that you did,
Mhm.
where I was thinking about people that it's no longer an option. And I had some of the same names. Lovett, Williams would be an obvious one for me to get the Florida centric, you
Yeah.
know, uh, point of view.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. I also thought about Aldo
Mhm.
because, man, I have read Sound County Almanac. I don't know how many times now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it hits home every time.
Right.
So, but Stoddard, I really appreciated what he did, and of course, like I was just at Tall Timbers, and his office is literally
Yeah.
there,
Right.
restored on the property. Uh, so that's really cool having that historical connection as well. But then I started thinking about it a little differently. It's like, well, who's still around? Who's still around that I would like to have on the show?
Well, we need to get them
So I thought
scheduled.
about that as well. I know. Well, we have one of the people that comes to mind immediately. We are trying to schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and that was Joe Hutto.
That's
He's
right.
the one that comes to mind. I really have enjoyed interacting with him, and would really like to have him on. I think the audience would appreciate his perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know. So you want me to ask another one, or you got something?
Yeah, ask away.
Well, we kind of, I guess it's sort of in the same sort of vein. Somebody asked, they essentially said, that they understood that we're kind of in the research realm, and we're trying to address questions, and they were just curious if we could talk about what's on the horizon. So what do you have do you have anything that you're excited about that you're currently working on or that's upcoming?
Um, so I'm excited about we're wrapping up the first round of our major initiative to collect data on turkeys in Alabama. So I've got
Yeah.
two graduate students that are completing their theses focused on that right now, and that's where been the bulk of my time and energy has gone towards that, and I'm really excited to get those results out there and share them with more of the public. We alluded in our last episode that we'll probably do breakout episodes, or at least one breakout episode on that study, if not a couple of them, and maybe even have those grad students on and have them give them an opportunity to present and share their perspectives.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm excited about getting all that stuff out, and then I've got several new projects incubating right now. One actually, I guess, just hatched. I guess you could say, staying with that theme.
Is that a
Um,
pun?
yeah, that's right. But that was the one. I've mentioned it a few times on here before, but it was inspired by listener questions early on, and particularly the ones from those listeners that are not able to burn on their property, or the property that they hunt for one reason or another. Maybe it's owned by somebody else, for example. And so
Hmm.
we're comparing plant communities and how useful they are for turkeys, and how they're likely to, um, in areas that are treated with prescribed fire versus those that are managed through alternative methods, maybe with like a selective herbicide. We're
Hmm.
actually trying out one or more. We're actually trying out more than one selective herbicide, or um, also, like things like mowing or disking during certain times of the year. Can we emulate those plant communities that we know are beneficial to turkeys that are stimulated by fire in areas that we can't burn using alternative means? So that one's going to be really good. And in fact, we're pairing simulated turkey nest with that study, and we're going to have cameras
Yeah.
over that nest, over those nests. They're all actually going to have hen decoys sitting on top of them too, is like that visual cue, which is something that
Hmm.
to my knowledge, no one's ever tried to add that, take that next step and add that additional realism to an artificial nest study before. So that'll be interesting, and
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get some really cool videos, from that. But
Oh man, that's
the
gonna be
power,
awesome.
right? So the power of that design is we'll have all these different management actions implemented across. I think we've got like eight different properties in Alabama, and they're all adjacent to each other on those properties. And so I can have a nest in the area that was burned, a nest in the area that was sprayed a certain way, and a nest in an area that was, let's just say, disked during the wintertime. And then I can
Hmm.
compare across these multiple properties and see if, on average, was the nest in treatment A depredated more often than the nest in treatment B. And those are gonna be some really cool results. I'm excited about that
Yeah.
because it's really
Yeah, that's
tying
great.
in that turkey demography component. Although we know a simulated nest is not a perfect replicate of a real one, hopefully it's given us trends in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
But it
Well,
link.
I think that's something important. You're not
Mhm.
necessarily trying to measure what the actual amount of predation on nest would be with that study. You're trying to compare how the risk of the nest changes under different vegetation management,
Yeah, it's like
right?
it's
So
relative risk. Is it more risky for a
yeah.
nest to be in an unburned pine stand versus a burned one versus one that's been mowed during the wintertime, for example.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there is a fair amount of work suggesting that it does, at least in some other species, where people have simulated nests. There's been a lot of work on this
Yep.
across a lot of bird species, and there's pretty strong evidence that it does reflect relative risk in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's important because people often pick on that, but
Right.
it is a good way to replicate something like a vegetation treatment and then get a relative risk,
Sure.
even though we realize there's limitations. There's not a
Right.
real hen tending a
Right.
real nest, obviously, and that's a limitation. But you also can't train the hens to go nest where you need them to replicate it. So,
No,
there's weaknesses to the alternative also.
that's right. That's exactly right. And the other important point to make too is in that study, the nest success rate, the artificial nest success rate, that is not the most important piece
Yeah.
of data that we're collecting. That the most important piece of data that we're
Yeah.
collecting is on the plant responses, because I can take
Yes.
all that plant response data and then go back to all this other literature that shows, okay, well, plant the plant response needs to look like this to maximize nest success, and I can compare each of those treatments and see how well they align with those habitat requirements, and then make inferences about how that management action would influence turkey populations on a property.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. Well, uh, while we're talking about the simulated nest, some of our audience may be aware, but on my YouTube account, I have been trying to be better about documenting experiments,
Mhm.
just like what we're doing in the field. And people seem to like to see like how we're going about doing some of this work.
Yeah.
So I started that with the nest simulation this year, and that's we've got it posted if you want to go watch it. But I have been working on a nest simulation study that's kind of similar to what you're doing, except I'm doing it with Dwayne Elmore at Tall Timbers, and we're using the Stoddard plots
Mhm.
where we can look at how fire frequency affects relative risk of nests. And that's
Mhm.
been replicated. And there's a 1, 2, 3 fire return interval treatment, and all of them have been on their respective fire return interval
Right.
since 1960. So, or 59, somewhere in that. I can't remember which year he actually started the burning, but uh, you know, what an awesome opportunity to leverage something that literally was started by Herbert Stoddard.
Yeah, how
To
cool is
get
that?
a question that's really relevant to people. And I'm excited not only because I'm excited to see how that experiment plays out, but I also started from day one documenting it and trying to put it into a format to
Mhm.
share it with people. So if you can get your student to do that, I think that that's a really cool way to engage the audience and let them see kind of how we're doing research.
I'm sure Kevin won't mind at all if I ask him to document everything while he's out there,
Yeah.
wor working his rear off.
Yeah. Just
"Hey,
tell him to wear a GoPro or
I
something,
just need
man.
you to do one more thing for me." Yeah. But
Here,
no, that's
I'll call him. I'll call him and say, "Kevin, I realize you got a lot going on, and I need you to document
have you ever thought about
it."
making a
So
YouTube video?
yeah.
Um, but no, that
Well, that's
I
the reason that we don't have more of that, right? It's not
that's
very
right.
convenient,
It's not. It's not.
but I just kinda have made it a point, you know what? I'm gonna start trying to do better.
Well, and another thing that I do want to take this opportunity to point out is, and our audience may be tired of hearing it, but we keep talking about how important it is to have, multiple people from diverse backgrounds and with diverse skill sets working on turkeys. Here's another case in point where I just described a study where we're looking at some alternatives to fire, and then we're also including fire as a component as a treatment in that study. But all of my fire treatments are going to be on the same fire return interval. So, in other words, we're
Yeah.
burning every 2 years in that study in all of our plots that are receiving a fire treatment. For me to
Mhm.
add in replicates that also included like 1, 2, and 3 year fire return intervals, it would have been like a huge expansion of the scope of the study because we would have needed much
Yeah.
larger blocks at each property. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have been able to identify as many replicates as I did because I probably wouldn't have had as many suitable stands
Yeah.
identified if I had that additional criteria. So that the benefit of having a lot of people working on a topic is like now Marcus is using that study to address the fire frequency aspect of the question while
Right.
I'm addressing the separate issues.
Yeah. And there's probably other people doing other ones that we don't even know about, you know.
Exactly.
That there is a lot of value in that. And I know we sound like a broken record on that, but I can't stress that enough.
Right.
Like we need all of our great minds working on this.
But the thing that I like the most about both of those two studies is, like we said, simulated nest predation is not a one-to-one match with actual nest predation, but it should give us some valuable trends. And the
Yeah.
power of that is that those types of studies link demography. So like by demography we mean, demographics, vital rates, statistics on how a population is performing to management, right? So
Yeah.
I'm evaluating management treatments, you're evaluating management treatments, and we're seeing how that affects the performance of turkeys. And that's the type
Yeah.
of study that I love more than any other to do. I mean, that's why I
Yeah.
went into this
Well,
business.
no, yeah, and the next step obviously is to connect real turkey vital rates to that,
Absolutely. Yes,
which
absolutely.
we are trying to do now. So
Mhm.
that's one of our upcoming things I'm really excited about,
Yep.
where we're trying to do a multi-state manipulative habitat project and connect turkey vital rates to the responses and vegetation for the treatments, you know?
Yep.
Uh, so we are moving toward that, and I'm excited about it.
Mhm.
What else? Do you have anything else on the horizon?
Got them some things cooking. We got all that carcass data back. The one thing that I haven't had a chance to look at yet is the neonicotinoid pesticide data. So
Oh yeah,
yeah, so we sent all those tissue samples off to a toxicology lab at Michigan State. There's really not many people in the country that can even do this. Come
yeah,
come to find out, but we sent samples from I think 100 gobblers. We strategically chose the locations where we sent tissue samples from based off of the probability of the use of neonicotinoid pesticides in that county. So just based on the agricultural data that we were able to pull for it, so we
yeah,
targeted those counties where is most likely that turkeys would be exposed to those chemicals. And so we sent those samples off. We got the data back. They put them through a panel that tests for all these different chemicals. Um, I can say that I mean, there were some of those chemicals showed up in some of our samples, but I've
hmm,
been so focused on addressing all the other objectives and deliverables that were associated with that project over the past several months that I haven't even had a time to sit down and look at those and start to learn about, what are the concentrations or the exposure levels that they have to get to before we start to be concerned.
right. So like
So
a biological relevance.
exactly. So Kevin Ostrander's the student that collected that data as part of his master's project. He's continuing on with me as a PhD working on the other project that I just described. And while he's doing that, he's gonna be picking that paper back up and running with it. So I'm excited about starting to pick away at that question a little bit too, because I know a lot of people have
Yeah,
had some concerns about the treated seed and things like that.
yeah. I have gotten I don't know how many messages, several of them pictures of people with the crop open of a turkey they killed, and it has a bunch of you know fluorescent
Yeah,
seeds in it, some sort.
right,
And I've gotten a bunch of messages asking about you know different chemicals.
right.
Neonic's probably the top one, but I've gotten a variety of questions like that. I'm glad you guys are addressing that.
Well, we're taking a little cut at it as a first cut,
Yeah,
but there's
well, that's
been
what you have to do.
that's right. And I think and I hope that our conversations that we have on here are communicating to people and help them understand how incremental science is. It's frustrating to
Yeah.
us. It's frustrating to us too as scientists, but
Yeah.
when you try to
I just
isolate
I
for a
want to go
single
out and do
factor,
everything. Yeah.
absolutely.
I want to go out and do everything all at once.
Right.
It literally, it, it, it's one of the most difficult things for me personally to navigate in my job is it feels like it's sort of like Christmas or something. It will never come,
Hmm.
right? You start collecting this data and you're super excited about it and you just keep on and on and on and on. And it just feels like it never gets there.
Yep. Yep.
And it just takes a long time,
I know.
to collect data and to analyze it and make sure that it's sound.
Yep.
Going through the whole publication process is even more cumbersome
Yeah.
and time consuming. So
So most of the
yeah,
time we only get the money to address one objective or part of an objective at a time. And
yeah,
adding into it a second objective. Let's just say like, you want to do a habitat study. Well, what if we added on a predation component to it as well? So we had a habitat management component and a predation component to it. Well, that might double or triple the cost of the study to add just that
yeah,
one
probably more
objective.
for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you think about them as factors, right? Every time you add a factor, you multiply all of the other ones by that number of factors, right? So
Right.
if you added predator and no predator, well, you now have to have each of your habitat treatments with predators and without predators. So you
Right.
doubled the amount that you need just by adding that.
That's right.
So yeah, it's difficult, but fun. I I, I wouldn't. I don't feel like I would fit anywhere else in society. So
I don't think you would
I'm
either.
not. I'm not complaining. I really do love what I'm doing, but sometimes it's difficult to wait
Yes.
because it takes a long time to gather the data.
Oh, I mean, that's the thing is, sometimes I feel like there, certain like some master students will come in and share results that they've recently, generated from an analysis with you. And
Hmm.
and sometimes, it's just a typical casual interaction, but there's other times when it's something that I'm really excited about where I'm like beside myself, like leaning over the desk to see the figure or whatever it is that they've produced.
Yes.
And some of them get it, but some of them are, I think, a little bit taken back by it. And I'm like, you have to realize that I first started talking to the organization that funded this research 5 years ago, and now I'm just now getting to see the data relative to
Yeah.
what we wanted to address.
You just got to open the package to see what's
Exactly.
inside.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's frustrating to me as well, and that there's a variety of situations. It doesn't apply ubiquitously across interactions, obviously, but sometimes like I'll have a student I'm working with or whatever, and they'll get some results back, from a lab or what they finished an analysis, and then you're like, well, what happened? Like I just can't wait to know what happened, and they're like,
Hmm.
well, I hadn't been able to look at it yet,
Oh
and you're like, what
no.
are you? Like
That's
that
the
would kill
wrong
me.
answer.
Like
That is the wrong answer.
I mean, a lot of times it's because they're like, killing themselves in the field trying to get field work done or whatever. But I'm
That's
just sitting
right.
here like, I wouldn't be able to sleep until I
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah. Yeah, I've probably missed
So
more than one important appointment because I just needed 5 more minutes to
yeah,
get to see the result.
yeah, like I need to know.
Yeah,
As soon as it comes in, I need to go see.
that's right. That's right.
Not everybody has shares that enthusiasm, and
No, they don't.
you know sometimes, but a lot of them do, and I really love working with folks that are like that. So exciting, and you can share that excitement with your colleagues. That's fun.
Well, did you have any more questions or do I need to dig one up?
You could dig one up if you want to, but I do have another one queued. Well, this one you will like, and you'll be. I think you'll be excited to answer it.
All right.
So this question was along the lines of, both you and I spend a lot of time with landowners, helping them decide what to do to manage for turkeys on their property and when to do it. What are you telling people to do right now in midsummer?
That's a good one. Um, if you need timber harvest on your property, that's a good time to do it. Whenever you can get
Yeah.
it done. That's going to be that's usually one of those deals is whenever you can get it done, get it done.
Yeah.
First one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. And that one you can make up a lot of ground real fast.
Absolutely. What about you? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, timber harvest is good. This is a good time to evaluate weed problems.
Yep.
And we had that episode last year with Craig talking about field management.
Mm-hmm.
Especially early summer is a great time to go and evaluate fields and take care of issues with problematic species.
Yep.
So that's a great thing.
Yep. You can go out and spot spray any problematic species in your early successional areas that you're managing for brooding or nesting. The one thing that I will say during late summer, or I guess are we late summer or midsummer? I guess we're past the solstice, so
I
that
I
means we're
kind
in
of feel
the
like we're midsummer. I would
we're
say midsummer.
we're midsummer, but we're kind of on the back half, right? Just over the hump.
Well, for me, like summer is going to last through early November. So
That's true. And for me, it's late October, so.
yeah.
But
Yes, it's summer until bow season opens, I feel
yeah,
like.
yeah, we're doing good if you have to wear a sweatshirt on Halloween. So,
Yeah.
but
We're doing good if you have to wear a sweatshirt.
yeah, ever.
Ever.
I mentioned spot spraying weeds in your early succession. When you do that, be aware. I mean, if you're using a hot rate of glyphosate, like a 3 to 5% glyphosate solution, then you're probably going to burn down mostly everything regardless. But if you're treating a lot of weeds, and especially like if you're doing a broadcast application right now, trying to control like an invasive pasture grass, do make sure
Yeah.
that you're setting that back to a young, actively growing stage before you spray it. Because my point was we're far enough along in summer now that there's a lot of plants that are starting to mature and form seed heads and things like that. And oftentimes that reduces the effectiveness of herbicides.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of that, there was one other thing that I did want to share. So this will be my contribution from a listener question, or at least I made one contribution rather. But I had a guy in one of those buried messages on Instagram reach out to me, and he asked me about he has a Sericea lespedeza problem. Okay.
Yep.
Very common invader of early successional areas. We've talked about it several times on this show before. Bad for turkeys because it outcompetes other plants using a variety of mechanisms, and it really doesn't produce a seed that's useful for turkeys, and it's not a good insect attractor. It, but it also survives so well that it gets reseeded a lot of times after earthwork is done, or timber harvest
Hmm.
is completed, as an erosion control plant. So very, very, as a result, it's a very, very common noxious invasive exotic weed. But
Yep.
glad he's working to control it. But I'll put his question to you, and I want you to start your answer by telling the audience what's wrong with the question. And I don't mean this as any slight to the listener. This is an opportunity to educate, because I feel like this is something I didn't used to understand, and I deal with landowners all the time that still don't understand it. But his question was, he's dealing with Sericea lespedeza. He's used various herbicides in the past, but he's going to use MSM 60 now, which is if you're not familiar, Marcus, it's basically a generic escort. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he asked me how much of that chemical he should add per gallon to his tank for a broadcast application.
Yep.
So what's wrong with that question?
Can you repeat the question? What's the size of the tank?
Well, he asked me what was the concentration of chemical that he should mix in the tank to do a broadcast application.
Well, I mean, you need to calibrate the sprayer to know
There
how
you
much
go.
chemical you're going to apply.
There you go. Yeah. So especially for a broadcast application, the rates that are gonna be listed on the herbicide label are gonna be in a volume per unit area.
Yes.
So like ounces per acre of product that is being applied. And so to do that, you
Hmm.
have to know how much, when you go out to spray, how much solution are you putting out per acre, and then you can use that to make the calculation for
Yes.
mixing your herbicide.
You know what we need to do? And there are probably some resources like this online.
Yes.
And I think we've talked about this before, but we need to do a video on how to calibrate a sprayer.
Yeah.
I would say that is one of the things it's relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that difficult to learn. Anybody that's managing land can do it. But I very rarely see landowners that have calibrated their sprayer
Right.
unless they're they're operating at a large scale or they're ag producers,
Right.
but most landowners I interact with generally are not thinking about that.
Yep.
But that's important.
Yep. And most of the time it takes 15 minutes or less, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it not only it potentially saves you money, prevents you from violating the law by incorrectly applying a pesticide, and it ensures that you accomplish your objective.
That's right. And it can be very important depending on what you're applying and where.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So
I
I'm
hope
glad.
you addressed it online. Oh, this was in your
Yeah,
spam folder.
I hadn't answered it yet. So great question. I'm glad you're killing Sericea lespedeza. I think you've chosen the right chemical. Escort or any of the generic Escort products that are metsulfuron methyl as the active ingredient is great for Sericea lespedeza. But calibrate your sprayer, figure out how much output it's applying per acre, and then you can use the herbicide label to
Hmm.
look up how much chemical you want to put out within that water solution per acre, and then you can figure out your recipe from there.
Yeah.
And I would give him the rate per acre that I typically use, but I don't know if we're supposed to recommend herbicide rates. um, I'm just a
Well,
I'm just a podcaster.
yeah. Apparently.
A
Yeah. Just a
podcasting
podcaster.
professor. I don't know. I don't want to be held criminally liable for
Yeah. Well,
throwing out a rate.
that is one thing though that I think both of us can say is that we are professors, but we both spend a fair amount of time in the field actively helping manage land.
Yeah. And I don't do
So
it as much anymore, but in the past I have been the one on the tractor doing a lot of the managing.
yeah.
Doing a lot of the planting and spraying and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
and still do
I still do some when
still do a
I just
fair
don't get to
amount.
go
Yeah.
home very.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
don't get to go home that often, but I do plenty of things when I am.
Yeah.
And then most of the time I'm working with landowners to tell them what to do.
Yeah. Most of the time anymore, if I'm doing something, land management wise in the woods, it's going to be burning. I don't spend as much time on the tractor anymore.
Yeah,
But
I would say I'm the same. Well,
yeah,
I do a lot of forest improvement.
yeah, forest and improvement too.
I do a good bit of that. So, do you have other questions?
No, that was the main one that I noticed that I hadn't got to yet in my Instagram messages, and I want to give one more teaser before we do that, the full episode on the data that I'm working through right now.
Yeah.
And it's that tidbit that I shared with you over text yesterday. And I kind of want to filter that through a question that we get all the time, which is, what should I be prioritizing? Like, I just bought this piece of property, or I just decided that I really
Yes.
wanted to step up the game and start managing this I want to take my turkey hunting to the next level. What can I do? So we just got done with an analysis that showed that for every 1% increase in early successional land cover across a property, and this was our study that was done from North to South Alabama. We had like 10 sites a year that were included in the study. But for every 1% increase in early successional land cover on that property, the amount of gobbling went up 10%. So if you increase
Wow.
so if you increase it early successional cover by 10%, Marcus, you're the math whiz. How much does gobbling go up?
100%.
100% increase from a 10% increase in early successional land cover. And there's going to
That
be,
is crazy,
I
man.
know there's going to be a peak to that somewhere, but
Obviously.
but the property in our study that had the greatest amount of early successional cover had 25%. And at that point, gobbling was still increasing.
That is remarkable.
I know. So,
You remember that time I said kill the grass, folks?
yeah.
We're back. Golly.
So if a lot of your property is in mid to late succession, you've got a lot of dense forest. That's the number one thing.
Yeah. That's good. That is just that's just good information. I cannot wait to have an episode to talk through that and think through all of the the different things that you
Yeah.
did and
Yeah.
what the implications are for people, because that response is strong.
Right. And then what's more is when we really get it down into the weeds, so to speak, the Forbes in this case. I'm glad you appreciated that.
Yeah.
We also took measurements at the scale of each, like in the immediate vicinity of each of our gobble recording units. And
Yeah.
so we had data at that large property level scale. So like, what should my property be comprised of? And then
Yes.
at the local recorder scale, we collected on the ground vegetation, species composition, and structure data. So we can say, okay, what are the understory management techniques that I need to use to maximize coverage of this condition that best meets turkey habitat needs.
Yes.
So we can get down into that information too. And I'll just share one more thing about it. It doesn't change any of the recommendations that we've made, in the past on this podcast, but
Do you want to just go ahead and record this now?
it reaffirms a few of them though.
Yeah. Well, man, that's powerful. We've been preaching that. Everybody that we brought on the show, really. We are in a situation where early succession seems to be limiting reproduction, and your data are just strengthening that,
Right.
and that's what drives hunter satisfaction, is how much gobbling are they hearing.
Yeah. From the habitat side, what this problem boils down to with turkeys is that in the states where they're declining the most, so predominantly the deep south states, the number one problem that we encounter is there's too much shade on the ground. And the second problem that we encounter is in the places where there actually is sunlight on the ground, there are plants there that are poor quality that are preventing the high quality turkey habitat plants from growing there. And that's really all it boils down to.
Yeah.
I mean, we can
You're
start
right.
fine tuning and talking about, how do we piece all that together and what do we do with that information? And that's where it gets complicated, but fundamentally that's the problem.
Yes. And grass.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I mean
The
by the
soft
grass.
forming grasses are,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's what I mean by the grass is like, where grass grows, the wrong grass is growing or the wrong plant
that's
overall is
exactly
growing.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the problem down here is not rain. Because we are getting plenty of that.
Well, that's good for you. I mean, I wish you could deflect some of it up this way because we haven't been getting a lot until recently. It was really dry for a few weeks there.
Yeah, we had a dry spell, but man, we're getting pounded every avenue now.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be down there.
Well, yeah, the only other question I can think of, I did get a question asking, what else did we do? You said earlier you're just a podcaster.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, what else do we do with our time?
Okay.
I was like, man, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't know if we should go into that here. I just thought it was
nothing
kind
productive.
of funny. Yeah, I can tell you what I do. I try to do a lot of productive things, but
Yeah.
I end up doing a lot of things I don't feel very productive doing,
Yes,
like
that's right.
paperwork or whatever.
That's right. Yeah, I
So,
mean, we work for government agencies, so we do a lot of paperwork. But
yeah,
man, the constant churn, you've got the teaching and the research component. You also have the extension component.
yeah,
That's satisfied by this podcast. But on the research side of the house, that's 60% of how I'm supposed to spend my time at working for Auburn.
yeah,
And what that entails is you're writing proposals to funding organizations to bring in money to do research. You're implementing that research, and that involves everything from personnel management to account management to experimental design, data analysis, interpretation, and writing. That whole process from start to finish. So you're always
yeah,
managing projects and things like that. You're writing, you're submitting articles to journals, you're responding to reviewers for those submitted articles. And then in the meantime, you're teaching a class here and there. I teach a class fall, I teach a class spring, I teach a class summer. And then somewhere in the mix of all that, we go out and we'll give presentations at various events and we do some site visits with landowners on occasion and um, we podcast. What am I missing?
yeah. That's pretty exhaustive, I would say. Mentoring. I mean, I spend a lot of time working with students and colleagues through particularly writing and communication. In my case,
Mm-hmm.
but I spend a lot of time trying to help develop other people's skill sets to help them succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a little bit different than teaching in the classroom.
Right.
But certainly a fair amount of our time spent doing it. And
That's right.
I think that's one of the most valuable things, especially with the graduate students, because they are the people that are going to go out and be in the state agency jobs or, continue the legacy in academia in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
That's like your broader network of influence that you're helping young scientists that are earlier in their careers
Yep.
develop.
Somebody's got to keep carrying that torch one day.
Yeah. So, okay, man. Well, I feel like we only answered my questions. So I guess we'll do another one. You ask questions.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Y'all let us know if that was useful and enjoyable, and we'll queue up some more if so.
Yeah, just keep people keep asking questions. We'll keep coming back. We need to go back to the survey as well. I know we talked about grabbing some of the survey questions, and it's still active. We still link it in every episode. If you guys haven't had a chance to take the survey, please do that because it helps us track kind of how people are using this podcast, but also gives us ideas on things to cover. Maybe we could do another one soon where we cover some of the topics that people have listed in there. We haven't done that in a while.
That's right. Well, cool.
All right.
I enjoyed it, man.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
All
Thanks
right.
everybody out there for listening. We appreciate all the support.
Appreciate it, y'all. Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.